Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Happy Sunday. I thought that was just a great song. That was Praying by Kesha. So why not have a little bit of the gospel undertones on a pop song that I think goes really well with the May theme. But if you have not seen my face before, hello, I am Katie Gideon. I will be the on-camera facilitator. And we are here for the first of the monthly setups for the month of May. And I want to give a huge shout out to my co-facilitator, who you'll see in the chat, Maya. She and I swapped spots from yesterday, where we did a weekly, and we will be back here tomorrow as well. Um, but we are glad that you're here. I love seeing all of our returning socialers. Welcome. It's always great to have you back. Apologies that I was so loud. Feel like I got really excited. I was up kind of early and prepping all of this stuff. So I woke up on the right side of the bed, and that's always a good thing. But if you are new to Silk and Sonder, if this is your first month, or if this is your first social, or if this is your first setup social, we would love to welcome you in the chat. And you can always participate in as much or as little of these socials as you want. Just double check if you want to participate, excuse me, in the chat with the Sonder fam. Make sure that it is set to everyone. It does always default to hosts and panelists. So while we know that you probably are thrilled to have a conversation with Maya and I, we know that you're probably more of a fan to get kind of the larger engagement, conversation, ideas, all of those amazing things. So we're glad that you're here. And we are going to tackle the new journal. If you don't have your journal yet, don't worry. You can take notes, get some inspiration. We record all of our socials so you can come back and take a look at it. As well as you can take some screenshots for some inspiration or just get those ideas. We know it can be really a lot when it comes to the sensory overload. I'm going to be talking. If I'm too much, you can turn me down or mute me. We're going to be playing music. It should be about the same volume that you just heard that one, but if you need to turn it down, mute it, you can do that as well. If the slides are too much, you can make those a little bit smaller. The chat, we've got quite a few folks in here, so it may go pretty quickly. Just keep in mind that you can click on a message at the above and scroll at your leisure. Or maybe you just kind of want to put the chat away and either focus on your journal, or you've just kind of, it's a little too early, your coffee hasn't hit you yet, and so you're just here for the vibes. We are just glad that you're here. I'm setting aside this time for you to focus or pivot on either the reflecting on the past month and looking forward to a new month, or really kind of buckling down and setting some of those kind of active goals that you can achieve in May. And so here are our community reminders. Be kind and courteous to yourself and others. No promotions or spam. Respect everyone's privacy. No hate speech or bullying. Limit repetitive product and accessory questions. But we do like to have the conversations because we know there is so much outside of Silk and Sonder that you guys like to share and connect with. And that's book clubs. I know the Finch app is quite popular. So please feel free to include that in the conversations. But we just want to remind you to not detract from why we're here, which is the Silk and Sonder setup. And then, as always, we will most likely redirect a lot of your customer care inquiries to our team, hello@silkandsonder.com. We know that people have a lot of thoughts and feelings about the flower colors, and how this particular year we're focusing on almost like a curated collection so that there's a little bit more commonality to it, with the only thing changing kind of subtly are those colors, but really it's the themes. And if that's not your vibe, send an email to headquarters and say that's not your vibe. Same thing with when we're scheduling and some of those things. We certainly like to hear it, but we know that there's a larger group out there. So sometimes we just don't know what we don't know. So if you feel compelled to do so, email hello@silkandsonder.com for that type of feedback. And then, as always, Sonder Socials are a tool to help elevate your emotional health through the power of community, but you're responsible for your own emotions, well-being, and decisions. So we love that you've come exactly as you are, but you should not walk away with this more upset, more negative. I always like to say, if you're not dancing by the end of my socials, I haven't done my job. But just keep that in mind. If you're not ready to tackle the theme, if you've had just a crappy month and you're just kind of still needing to have that couch pity party, as I always throw on a pretty regular basis, that's perfectly fine. But just keep that in mind as you're setting yourself up for these. You don't have to you don't have to do anything you don't want to. There is no like final exam with this. No one is going to check and see how much progress you've made on this. This is really for you to walk away with either a little bit more inspiration, a little bit, almost like your head a little bit higher. You're just feeling a little bit better about that. But again, that is something for you to control because we are glad that you're here. And we're glad that you're going to spend the next hour and 15 minutes with us as we tackle this new theme, tackle this new month, but also provide inspiration from everyone. So, new month, new theme. And the theme is integrity. And just brief backstory. I was in the military for 10 years and I did go to one of the service academies. I went to the Naval Academy. So I feel like there are just things that live absolutely rent free in my head. And I'm one of those people that there's so much repetition that as soon as integrity came up, this quote came right after it in my head. Integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching. Because that was drilled into my head for many, many years. So I wanted to start, and this is how I start every month's theme with what do I know? And then I like to explore more into what can I do differently? How can I turn this inward as the weeks progress through the month? So I was going to start with what do I know? And what I know is this ingrained quote. And I tried to then turn it into how can I relate to what I'm going through now? How can I relate this outside of almost like the military overtone that it has? And I had a great example of my work contract in Scotland ended, and so I'm currently looking for new jobs, and I was prepping for an interview. And the thought that came to me is I messaged a friend of mine and I was like, I am just thrilled to get an interview. And my friend left a voice note and said, stop that. She was like, you shouldn't be thrilled. She was like, they're actually should be really excited that they've found you and that they're going to get to talk to you. And I was like, oh, okay, that's I guess a good point. But afterwards, I still felt like I was on the like back foot where it was like, no, I'm just glad to be here. I'm just glad to sit at the table. I'm glad someone wants to spend 15 minutes asking me to like sell myself for this type of job. And I realized that that was not quite on the self-integrity mindset because it was like everyone is telling me all of these great things. They're like, you're ready, you're prepared, you bring a lot, you're going to do fine. And I'm sitting here going, I am not doing well as an adult, period. It's like my resume is weird. I am weird. I don't want to do this. I have all these things. So I felt like that was a really good example of doing the right thing, even when no one was watching, because the right thing is that I don't need to have that defeatist mindset going into this interview because it is just an interview. And I was kind of beating myself up, worrying over it. And I just appreciated that perspective. But then I started to peel back the layer of how many times has a friend or a family, someone that you really expected, said that you did amazing on something, or you did a great job on something, or you're really like doing amazing things at the moment. And you turned around and said, yes, thank you. I'm excited. But you've turned around and almost dropped the mask and been like, oh my gosh, I didn't do this right. There was a typo. The format looked weird. It was like I stuttered too much. I said too much. I flailed my hands around. And I feel like that is a way to kind of pivot with this self-integrity without getting kind of all staught up again. And like for me, the military overtone, but it was the quiet things of like, are you outwardly doing all of these things, or are you almost cutting down all of the good things that someone is saying about you because you're dwelling on where you see your shortcomings? So that was where I pivoted into that. And I think it goes great into Mayha's letter on page 2 because I found it quite relatable. And I do think if we start matching those outward ideas with the internal motivation, we can show up more fully. And then what I also pulled from this is that we're the same person on the outside that you are on the inside. So even though you're showing and exuding all of this confidence, are you taking away from that because you're beating yourself up about it, or you're just being so nitpicky, or you've given that voice inside your head new batteries so their megaphones on like full blast? And I think I appreciate that, but also the idea of knowing what your truth is and making choices that honor it. I feel like that's also a huge component of integrity. And then this last one that I feel like we're all in this vibe, and I appreciate the imposter syndrome statement there because the final statement is you don't owe anyone a performance. And I think that's something very hard for me to kind of digest. I'm certainly a people pleaser. I want to have the outward appearance that I have my act together, because I have all these amazing skill sets. I have all these great experiences, but the first person to doubt myself is absolutely me. And I think that is kind of the pivot that I can make with that phrase that, like I said, as soon as you say integrity, it comes out um, doing the right thing when no one was watching. That just comes out without skipping a beat. And I feel like it's a way that I can pivot it into kind of a self-integrity, but also kind of on this overall self-care journey without it having that kind of industrial, militarized, factory-esque vibe to it. So that's kind of the direction that I've taken this. And as we go through the month, which I'm excited about, because this is one of those themes that I genuinely feel like I know a lot about, but I know it in such specific contexts that I appreciate the challenge to now expand that and find new ways to incorporate it into my non-military life, but also just my kind of personal life in general, because I compartmentalize so much of that as was. And I already appreciate in the chat, I'll have to go back and catch up on all the great things that you've said, but I think it's a good theme. And I think it's a great segue from the awareness theme that we had in April, because I think it's another one of those of, can we highlight some of these almost like disconnects, and can we start building more of a connection between all of those different facilities, as well as on the values in general. So, we're going to cover a whole lot more in this next hour. And we're going to start with that a monthly acrostic poem, which is a great initial introduction into the word and the theme and building that relationship. Then we're going to do some April reflections. Then we're going to set up those May intentions. And then we're going to help compound all of those things by supporting it with the mood tracker and the habit tracker. So, buckle up. So we're going to start with the integrity acrostic poem, which I went through all of these different stages to finally come to the realization that it is just printed this time in your journal on page 19. And so this was a great way to just do a free association into the 9 words or phrases for integrity. And then you can create that acrostic poem, and you can brainstorm all of these lists and ideas. And these can be sentences, these can be single word phrases. The words don't even need to start with the words that integrity has, because I do find it tricky when I have to have duplicate letters. So I's I found tricky, and T's I found tricky just because of that repetition. So you can get as creative as you want with this. And so again, we're on page 19. I have pulled the definition from page 3, with this type of definition, but as we know, that can expand to a bunch of different things. But I wanted to add that as just maybe a guiding help with that, especially as we go through it. And then Maya, who creates our amazing slide decks, she has provided some acrostic integrity poems already just for some of the words and inspirations. Because even I, on a Sunday morning, if you were asked me to come up with words that start with I would come up with I. And we came up with some synonyms. I am a big fan of my thesaurus pigeons, but they were a little chaotic this month because they had a couple different versions of integrity. But I found the quintessential words for other integrity, because sometimes you get hung up on the word itself. So maybe if you need to reframe or reconnect with the theme, you can use one of the synonyms. And if the acrostic poem isn't for you, maybe you want to write a letter saying goodbye to April and hello to May. You can fill in the To Me Integrity Means section on page 3. And we always also throw out these ideas because we know quite a few of you attend other monthly setups. And so maybe you've already done your acrostic poem and you work on one of these other components. Or you can even just do something completely different with, think about just small moments that you had to show integrity, or that you've seen integrity on display, because I feel like sometimes we don't always have opportunities to celebrate all of these as we are working on ourselves and our self-care journey. So I love to find the little snippets of, can we celebrate maybe what we've already done or how we've gotten here to some extent, because I feel like sometimes even I'm like, I've reached this goal, now what's my next one, and not giving myself time to kind of celebrate in the goal or the journey that I've already had. So that is what we're working on. So if you are just now joining us, our first exercise is on page 19 in your May journal, and we're doing that acrostic poem for inspiration when it comes to integrity. I'm going to play some music, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Appreciating seeing all the conversations around the concept and the theme of integrity, as well as just helping out with some of those words that start with. Like I said, I feel like you stumble a little bit, and with the longer words, I just have absolute massive roadblocks when I hit some of those letters. And what I like about it is you can be as creative with those letters as possible. So maybe if you weren't quite connecting to a word that started with a Y, maybe you can find a word with a Y buried somewhere in there, and that would be just as well. And then I saw that someone had pointed out kind of that definition of integrity, or looking at it from that really interesting lens of, well, would it be demonstrating integrity by being a little bit more truer to yourself, or would it be showing integrity because you're outwardly supporting either the positive feedback or comments that you got instead of being negative? And I feel like that's a great connection. And I know Maya provided a really great response in the chat as well. And I think it builds into a little bit of the overlap from the awareness theme into the integrity theme. Bailey did such a great job of talking about being self-aware, but also being almost selective with where the feedback is coming from. Is it coming from a really great place, someone who has your best interests, or is it just feedback that is out there for the sake of providing feedback? And I think that's where you can kind of live in that integrity component, where if it's someone kind of giving you that random feedback, out of context or that type of thing, I think that becomes that like, you are in charge of your own responses to those things. I think I was really more coming a little bit back into people who know me very well, who have seen me in the highs and the lows, who have helped me work through really tough decisions. So I definitely feel like it's more of like they're providing the very realistic, wholesome feedback that is needed because they know all of the good, the bad, and everything in between. And so that's where I feel like it's a little bit of not myself doing myself a disservice in the fact of like where I'm outwardly saying, yes, I agree, but then internally pivoting and be like, they don't know what they're talking about when really and truly they do. And so I feel like it becomes that type of almost like critical thinking that we just need to do when it comes to feedback, because I know we all want to get better. We all want to use those lessons learned. We want to complete the feedback loop for how we can better ourselves. And I think sometimes that's more of the lens there. But I think it's also that connection of how can we combine self-awareness into this self-integrity component to still not put on a performance for people, but also being as true to ourselves as we can be. So that's just my thought. And if you want to have those thoughts and share in the chat, we would love to continue that conversation there, because I do think it's just what's really great about these socials is how can we connect all of those other things? How can we make our experiences richer and more beneficial across the board? But how can we share our stories with everybody else? So that's what I love about it. And so now, shifting gears, but please feel free to continue to respond to the previous conversations or prompts and that even as we move forward. This is certainly our time to connect and have those. And Mai puts it exactly, love joining the socials because the group gets it. And we get it in so many different ways. And we other cover so many things that we then walk away with all of those really cool little nuggets that we can explore and think about and incorporate. And in the kind of April reflection feedback format, We're not going to work on that page, and we're going to focus on looking at it through the lens of wins, the challenges, the favorite moments, the what do I want to start, what do I want to stop, and what do I continue. So this is on page 8 in your May journal, and we're doing those April reflections. And the quick kind of summary of kind of how can you start with this? The wins are going to be something that you did, something that made you smile. If you've done some of the roses with you, you've kind of already done some of that work. What are those highs? The challenges and something that didn't go right, something that was out of your control, something that took up too much time, energy, and effort in your worlds. And what I find really interesting as I continue to work on the reflection pages month to month, as well as now year to year, is the wins are like the things that I've done. Challenges tend to be those mental and emotional, almost, I'm going to call them shortcomings or roadblocks that I've come from. But I found it really interesting that the wins are those tangible things that I could recreate through a really classy checklists, where the challenges are those squishier or even the crunchier feelings where it's like, I don't know how to really turn those into wins. I feel like that's just been an interesting thing that I have discovered of where my wins are. They're the things that I can see that I can do. The challenges are more of those internal pivots that I feel like just adds to that kind of duality of really wanting to match the outside and the inside. But I always found that really interesting. And then favorite moments, that's just another great way to celebrate. And at the same time, you can have help with this. You can do it to review your calendar, the photos, all of those great things. You can even turn to those rosebud thorns. It's like you don't have to recreate the wheel. This doesn't have to be brand new answers every single time. And there can also be some consistency there. Maybe one of your wins is that you stayed on the goal, that a goal that you set back in January, and you want to continue to celebrate that. What I really also like about this page is the start, stop, and continue, because I am one of those, as we're talking about the feedback loop, I like to take some of those thoughts, feelings, and emotions, events, and turn them into kind of tangible steps forward. And I like the start, stop, and continue idea. And there are a couple different ways to approach that, but that is how I connect my reflections page to my intentions page, because sometimes that's where I just need a little help, a little extra support. And one way to really, I think, build that connection is with that start, stop, and continue with the why and the how. So you're asking yourself, why do you want to start, stop, and continue something? And then you're going to help define how you're going to do it. And so that's where you can take those why answers and kind of turn them into your intentions for the next month, as well as the hows. And those can get overlaid in either the mood tracker or the habit tracker or even the weekly spread pages. So I love when we can kind of find these little connection points across the different pages of the journal, because maybe that's sometimes what you need this month. If you come to some of my other socials, I always like to ask, what do you need? And I feel like you can also look at it from what do you need from this month on that type of scale versus what do you need on a weekly basis. So those are just those connection points that I like to carry through. But maybe that is not your style. Maybe that's not how your brain works. Or you're like, Katie, I've tried it. I need a break from all of that like mental gymnastics, and I'm tired of pulling the different threads across the different proverbial pages. So maybe it's more of the very clear, concise goals. Smart goes with you, if you will, for the perfect interview answer. But maybe you have a larger thing that you want to focus on. The top left one wants to focus on what do they want to start, stop, and continue within their health and wellness. So they're building that what, why, and how over those different categories. So maybe you want to focus on one really specific thing, and that's a way to kind of pivot that focus here. Or again, sometimes it's adding a little bit of the whimsy or some of the fun to it. Continue letting those stickers live out their sticker destiny. Maybe it's starting to gamify some of these things because you're just a little drained, and maybe it's stop kind of editing yourself as you go. And then the other really, I think, kind of interesting example is the bottom one, where again, they have highlighted what they want to start, stop, and continue on like a larger idea. They want to start a new morning routine. And then they've given the hows and the whys across the specific weekly plan. So for a new morning routine, they're going to wake up 20 minutes early. That's going to go directly into the week one. Same thing with they've got a very specific goal for the week 2 and the week 3 and the week 4. So again, that I think is almost like, I always hate to use the word micromanaging as like a bad word, but I think in this great situation. Sometimes it helps to be a little bit micromanagey in this self-care stuff because I think a lot of us are having to find this in the margins. So why not give yourself that type of clear guidance to help future you, where it's like, I know this month is going to be busy. We're going to have a lot of schedule changes, and I will absolutely stand by. The sprint into the summer is almost as chaotic as the sprint to the end of the year when it comes to holidays because May, love May, birthdays start popping up. Weddings start popping up, graduations, the new school years are ending in preparation for that. So I just feel like so much of our time no longer becomes our time. So this is a great time to maybe try out some of those almost like micromanagement tools when it comes to your start, stop, and continue. So now that I have done quite a bit of talking, I am going to play some music. And so we're working on page 8 in your May journal, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Please continue to share your responses if you want to, and definitely ask me if I need to go back to different examples as I roll through these. So now that we've reflected on the previous month, this is where you do get to make that intentional decision to decide, am I taking any of this with me into the new month of May, or am I going to leave some of it, most of it, all of it in April. And so I love being able to have that moment of intentional thought to kind of figure out what I want to do with the next month. And so you can take time to reflect on that. Because again, you do have the entire month to kind of go through and look at your intentions or even revamp and revise and add to it. So we are breaking up with the perfection idea of maybe what you thought was going to be great on a random Sunday is maybe not what you need come May 15th, May 16th, May 17th, or even May 27th. So you have the ability to kind of take a little bit of that ownership. But we do like having some sort of blueprint for potentially what May is going to look like. And so we're going to be on page 9. And so we do have these kind of set published categories. But what we love about this is that you can set your intentions to the theme of the month, which obviously integrity. You can maybe focus on one area because we again like the zoom in and zoom out concept. You're going to hear me say that all the time. I have so much of a GIS background, so I'm always zooming in and zooming out in that capacity. So you'll hear me use those, probably overuse those. But I think it can be really valuable depending on what layer you're going to look at. Maybe you want to lean into a motivational playlist. I am a big song and lyric person, and I love using them for my intentions because it's usually songs that I'm listening to already. And so if I tie it to an intention and it comes on the playlist, that automatically triggers in my brain, hey, you should probably take a look at this because here's the song that inspired it. And either come up with a plan during that song or that kind of like moment of, ooh, where am I with that? Maybe it's asking yourself questions. How do you want to feel this month in those particular areas? How do you want to show progress? How do you want to celebrate it? How do you want to look at it? And again, we love those stickers. We love those colors. We love those imagery because we know that pictures are worth 1,000 words. So you can always kind of use that as an example. And then you can also look at a duality component of one thing you want to let go, one thing you want to start doing, pull some of those start, stop, and continue components that you just looked at on page 8. And not only do we like the idea of potentially leaning into the Silk and Sonder theme, but sometimes that does get covered pretty heavily in the prompts. And so you need maybe a little bit of a breather when it comes to the overall theme. So that's why we overlay some of these other themes. So it's Mental Health Awareness Month, Military Appreciation Month, Meditation Month. I know someone was talking about the thoughts, feelings, and emotions going into a yoga retreat and after. I like the National Share a Story Month because I think all of you have amazing stories that you need to tell. So be that somewhat obnoxious person on a flight and start talking through things. I've had amazing conversations with people on very short flights, but do not be afraid to tell the stories that are uniquely you or from your perspective because someone is gonna remember that and it's gonna resonate. And I love that. Maybe you need to focus on some of those more physical side of things. The Better Sleep Month. I take it personally when someone talks about the sleep because my sleep is not great, but I'm getting better. My Fitbit even says I'm getting better. Or maybe it's a good time to work on the National Walking Month because sometimes that is the most valuable movement you can do throughout the day. And then we love that while there are published categories, you can actually change some of them. Maybe spiritual health is not really something you're connecting with. Maybe it's mental health. Maybe you want to be a little bit more specific with physical health and narrow it down to mental, heart, or brain health. I have found that the key relationships can be a little hard for me to connect to if I keep it vague. So I like to pivot into a specific, maybe it's your family relationships, maybe it's a work relationship, maybe it's a friend relationship, maybe it is a more romantic type relationship. So I have found that I like to define those and, identify what is the key component to it. And same thing with professional goals. We know each and every one of you are in very different phases of your life, different milestones, different chapters. So maybe professional goals is not what you want to focus on, or maybe you have a completely separate pathway to do that. So maybe it's learning goals, creative goals, hobby goals, even seasonal goals. So I find that the flexibility to change these to see fit. Do not be afraid to do so because again, no one is going to come over here and be like, why did you do that? And then as I've already kind of alluded to, I do like this idea of duality, and that's the you can do something and like go something, more of something, or less of something. And then I always like the one because I feel like we always get into this conversation of when is rest productive? When is rest lazy? And so I even think we are not the Energizer Bunny as much as we want to be, or like to be, or think we are. So you always need to either have like an action item, but then you need that stationary component to it. And whether you reframe it as lazy or rest or reset or refresh, totally up to you. But I still think you need to have an action and a stationary when it comes to some of that duality. And I find that really helpful, really valuable, because I have run into those situations where mentally and physically, I am not as connected. I have an autoimmune condition. So mentally, I've got the stamina of someone without it, and physically, it doesn't quite connect. So there are times where I am forced to slow down. So just being holding the space for both of those, I found quite helpful when it comes to setting those intentions. And then at the same time, we know that not everyone wants to make the big scary commitment of pen to paper, or even pencil to paper, colored pencils, markers, take what you want. And so sticky notes can absolutely be your best friend. And maybe that's because you know that your May is gonna look a little bit different than what you expect. Or maybe you're working on kind of some quarterly goals or an annual goal, some of those like longer multi-step goals. So you want to carry some of those intentions over from month to month as you go, and then just specify the small steps when it comes to those intentions. So feel free to use those. I know Jen O, one of our other facilitators, is a big fan of this, just till she kind of finds a thing that really resonates. And I know a lot of folks have been still kind of even discovering what their word of the year is going to be. And again, liking that duality of embrace and release. And then even framing it as feeling this and how you're going to work on it and how you're going to bring in those habits. So now you're adding that how and the why even built into the intentions. If you didn't quite maybe resonate with that on the previous page. We love the stickers. We love all the thing about that because maybe that's the inspiration that you want and you need. You need that visual connection. We know some people are on the digital side, and so the ability to kind of creatively still put your spin on a lot of those things, I think is really great, especially within the digital component. And then we like the kind of repurposing, revamp style. The one on the left, their overall thing that they wanted to focus on was reducing stress. So they changed the different categories with that and came up with a mantra or an affirmation, something to compound it. And then the action was going to be the how. So maybe that is more what you want to work on. Maybe you want to lean into some of those. Like I said, as we talked about sleep, you could almost restructure this with the new ones. And I know Heather, yeah, it is. And I love it. This is Heather's. I just thought it was a really great, because I always like to find one that has the different goals, but then one that really focuses and double down on a single goal, a single idea, because sometimes that's how you need to get through the month that you have. So I loved the complete revamp, repurpose, and refocus. And same thing with the one on the right. I love the creative visual. And again, it's taking those intentions and turning them more into the mantras or the turning them into more of the I want instead of the I need thought. I love a good I want song. So that's where I make that connection. So I love the crystal ball. It is an analogy that I use often when I'm asking people to like forecast the future. I'm like, if look into your little crystal ball and tell me what you think. I'm not going to commit you to anything, but I always appreciate being able to kind of throw out that almost like insight, because I find like you can learn a lot from people by asking them to forecast. I do it a lot in my professional setting because then you realize, are they risk averse? Are they, do they have optimistic outlook? Are they a little bit more on the pessimistic side? So even asking yourself, well, how do you see yourself at the end of the month? I think can also tell you where your headspace is. Are you on a really positive outlook? Or are you kind of doubling down a little bit on the negative, pessimistic side? And I think it's one of those you still need to feel and go through all of those thoughts, either with a type of lens or tone. But sometimes that's just a helpful tone to have. And that's when I talk about the couch pity party that I throw, where it's like, you can tell me all the amazing things. I can sit there and look at all the amazing things. I can do all of those things. But there are days where it's like, I'm just going to feel the way I feel and I just need to get through it because it's not going to change it. I will probably fight you on it because I'm stubborn. So I feel like it becomes one of those like, what kind of a lens can you kind of wash over this to see, am I going to be like on the same page with that mental and physical connection, or am I going to be fighting myself the whole time? So we're working on page 9 with our intentions. Love to hear how you're approaching your intentions this month, and we'll see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. Appreciated seeing all the conversation around how they approach different things, the different intention ideas they have, even just the kind of edited versions that we see. I appreciate. And obviously, I think it was Heather that shouted out she was working with Jenny, which is our amazing AI coach, that can kind of help this type of feedback because they learn what you have. And I can also say at the end, if you haven't quite tried that, we have a trial option that you'll get to use if you're interested, just to see how it works because we're always creating new ideas to it. It's always getting updated, new features. Mayha gets very excited about all of those things, so you'll have the opportunity to see that a little bit later. But now we're going to move into what I consider somewhat of maybe the lighter side of the monthly setups. But I always don't always want to like wash it with the lighter side because I feel like these also come with like the harder work. And as Bailey puts it, these can be data points, and sometimes data can be overwhelming, data can be sad, data can be scary, but at the end of the day, it is just data. And it's that type of awareness feedback that potentially some of us are looking for. But it can be something a little bit out of our control. And I always like to keep certain things in my sphere of control because I'm one of those people as well. So I'm always interested with the variables that we can change and alter. But at the same time, I know it can be a little tricky. So we're going to work through this together. This is on page 10. This is the mood tracker. And we are Team Circle this month, which I know again people have their thoughts and feelings about that. But I will say for me in particular, the trackers that we use, I'm gonna lean very heavily on other people's examples and those things because I am a creature of habit. So my moods don't change too much, my habits don't change too much. So I am a less than interesting person in that regard. And sometimes I think these do get a little tricky and these do get a little challenging. And these are things that are something that I feel like can get stale a bit. And so always trying to find something new, something different. But at the end of the day, the way I frame the mood tracker is these are moods. You're going to have them, you're going to feel them. And sometimes a lot of it is how can we navigate it? How can we learn something else? And what I love about this particular setup is that you can overlay a couple different variables to maybe see some of that cause effect, or maybe it's the unintentional causation that can be there as well. So you can always focus on the theme. You can fill in every emotion that you have that day or whatever one is the strongest. And again, this is an opportunity to overlay either how your creative mind works or how your little analytical mind works because you get to define kind of your legend for this. You can define how you want to make it creatively. You can create that visual that you want to see, that you want to have on either the kind of opening sale or even on the completion end, what it's going to look like to motivate you to have it completely filled. So I like this idea. We will go back to these if you need some help when it comes to emotions, but I have found that if people do track their moods, they tend to have the same ones. And again, not a bad thing. I feel like it's one of those you either really lean into almost the repetitive comfort of it, or you lean into the kind of revamping. And I appreciate that. So we have the very lovely circle mood emotion type thing that can be used, but I don't think really in terms of circles sometimes. I love this graph and I love the overlay of the feelings, the energy versus the feeling. So the high energy, positive feeling overlaid with like a low energy negative feeling, which I feel like those come so hand in hand. And I also am a color person. My interior design aesthetic, for lack of a better term, tends to lean on the cool tones because I find those calming. So I lean into the cool tones. But as I've talked about with when the seasonal depression hit me much harder this go around than it previously had, I was having to lean into wearing the bright colors to maybe help kind of feign some of that positive feeling, higher energy. And I found that that was helpful. And so I do think there is a color element. And if you go to any of Jeno's coloring socials, there's that. But I'm always fascinated with that kind of cool tone. Not the like seasonal how to dress colors. My sister's obsessed with those at the moment. For me, it's genuinely if you are in the kind of calm, needing those things, so it does become kind of the ocean vibe, those type of tones. So I appreciate this perspective on it. And so you can also repurpose this, and we love the repurposing idea. So now I'm going to throw a handful of examples at you. Let me know which ones I need to go back to if you want that visual. If you are someone on the anxiety or panic attack thing, you can use this simply to define what type of attack you had. Because I do feel like what is really interesting is that the kind of stronger things will stick out over the course of the month. So if you're like, oh, I feel like all I had were bad days this month, but you go back to this almost like a baseline tracker, you realize that maybe you only had two or three kind of negative days or panic attack days, but they were quite intense. So I feel like that becomes that variable that you can kind of add to. Maybe it is overlaying the emotions and the energy, kind of those type of things, different variables, or even again, a complete repurpose. Maybe it's a physical care tracker. Maybe it's more of how you boosted your mood tracker. So it was leaning into, you needed some extra help with that. So what were the things that you leaned into? Did you lean into your hobbies? Did you lean into some of those other things? Did you really kind of lean into your journal? And I think those, there's no right or wrong answers for those. It's kind of what you want to work on. Did you bring in other activities? The mood tracker at the bottom right, I really appreciate it because it was leaning into how you associated that month with. So January, it was like I wanted to feel cozy. I wanted to drink all of the warm beverages. In the summer, it was like the opposite. It's like bring all of the citrus, bring all of the everything served on ice, bring some of the like barbecue, outdoor kind of cookout vibes, or even some more of like we know as we start to hit the late spring, early summer. I know the autumn girlies come out in full force of like I cannot wait to wear a sweater as I am sweating in a very large sweatshirt or those type of things. So I feel like it's connecting, what are ways that you can affect your mood with either connection to the type of season, the month, or something else in that idea. Same thing with if you're on another healthcare journey, maybe it's a food tracker. Maybe you are wanting to track your energy. Maybe it's leaning into those hobbies. And then the one highlighted in the middle, what I like about this intentions tracker is I love the idea of helping future you help yourself, especially when it comes to journal routines. And that is you can kind of lay these Hansel and Gretel style breadcrumbs for those. So maybe instead of a mood tracker, it is the intentions tracker because you want to go back and revisit those intentions because you've worked hard or you really want to buckle down on those. And so I think that's the idea for that because we had six categories. Now you have six intentions, so you can track them that way as maybe something a little bit different. And then here, I think really good classic examples of the mood tracker. One is very inside out emotion vibe, which I love. And then I saw that Leanne is in the chat from an RV. Whoop, whoop. I'm in my parents' RV and the driveway of their house, my new office, as I joke. And she revamped the mood tracker to her business habits. So I think that's another great idea of can I repurpose this for something that I'm specifically looking at? Because the habit tracker maybe is more something that you're focusing on for the self habits. And this is an overlay to those. So that I think it's great for entrepreneurs. I think you can also do it for education. And even again, leaning into some more of those hobbies is a way to track those different things that you want to do. And then here again, other repurposing and even the final picture. But what I like about the stress tracker on the right is it's not only acknowledging that you're feeling stress, but giving you a scale to kind of determine it and then providing a solution for it. I feel like we did so much of that type of work in the mind map when it came to what are some of the physical and emotional symptoms of stress or anxiety or even just kind of starting to feel not your best self and being tapping into that awareness side. So maybe this is where you can kind of turn that into an action item. And then again, more versions, the tough day versus the great day, which again, I love because something it's as simple as that of saying, I had a good day, I had a not so good day, and then being able to look back on that data. Data is not scary, data is helpful. Or we know people have always asked about a spending tracker. So here's one version, again, specific work goals, or if you want to lean into those different types of rest when it comes to the self-care. So I am going to play a song and we will see you soon. Thank you, everybody, for sharing. So now we are going to move to the habit tracker, which is over on page 11. And so this one definitely goes hand in hand, I think, with the mood tracker, or you can connect this directly to your intentions, or even that start, stop, and continue section when it comes to the how. How can we piece some of these things together? And I think this is where I have a hard time with it because for the habit tracker, the monthly habit tracker specifically, these are the things that I want to do every single day. And then I add the lens of reality on the weekly side because I pull all of those. And as I mentioned before, I am a creature of habit. So I really only stick to three things. And that is move, read, and journal in that order, in that frame or fashion. I've added a kind of refocus kind of a reacclimation thing with the like I'm in a weird limbo section, so I've had to add that as like a fourth habit, and I've had to then define it in the weekly habit tracker just to kind of add context because that's one of kind of where I'm at. But as always, you can use the theme of integrity as the focus. You can pick another theme. You continue those habits from last month, which is definitely my thoughts and feelings, but we always recommend taking a look at it, finding that balance, and you don't have to fill every line. Here are some great habit tracker ideas if you're needing something fun, something inspirational, because I always recommend throwing that in as one. For me, it can be take the long rain home. Coming out of winter, it's usually find the sun, because then I like to do all of my activities in the sun. And same thing with like, it falls into the like dance like no one's watching, sing like no one's listening, kind of that idea. So it's always one of those kind of a whimsy or an adventure or a bucket list item, which I talk about in a lot more detail in the weekly setups. But loving the visual for these. But what I appreciate with the specific call out to the one on the left is we know that life happens. And so sometimes managing your expectations can be really tricky and really hard. But just the sheer acknowledgement of this was my plan, and then I needed to refocus and repivot, I think is an excellent acknowledgement of this page to where you should be able to look at this and be like, well, I failed because I didn't do my habits every single day that I wanted to do. But I do not think that is the correct analysis of the data provided here. It was something unexpected happened, and then you had to pivot and then manage it as best you can, because we know that if you are physically tired, emotionally tired, you're not going to show up for your best self. And so why would the habits then be your best version of? And then the one on the right, adding some sort of range or satisfaction score to it, you can do in that capacity. And again, I like the idea of showing that the vacation is there, or because sometimes I'm one of those, I don't do habits on vacation. That is truly my vacation from all of the above. But maybe that is actually what you need on vacation. Again, more ideas with the focusing on a morning routine, or an evening routine in that capacity. And then again, the one on the left is the Hansel and Gretel idea with building that routine, the habit routine within your journal. So it's acknowledging to fill out your gratitude log, your mood and creative trackers. Maybe it's revisiting those intentions or even the intention tracker they've created. So I love the idea of using it for that. The one on the right is Bailey is one of our facilitators where she was like, here are the big concepts I need to do. But I've also provided a list of things I can do within those habits so that I don't have to come up with something new or different every single day. I don't have to make that decision. It's almost that pre-planning that can be helpful, especially if you have a lot going on. Maybe it is a completely different theme. Maybe it is leaning into something fun about the month with that kind of visual. And you all know that I love my iconography. And so I've repurposed my expense tracker for an adventure and a bucket list. And that's because I feel like I do really fun things and I want to continue to give them the spotlight they deserve. And that's everything from having a really brunch day, make a big breakfast from scratch, exploring parts of town I've never been to. I actually went to lunch with a friend in an area I haven't been, and I'm back in my hometown. So it's those little things that I feel like deserve an importance added to them without having to always do something different, do something new. As much as I love a spontaneous weekend road trip, that's not always something within the cards, but it is maybe pivoting and seeing a new perspective. So I love this idea of finding magic in ordinary days, because sometimes the schedule just can't handle it, and sometimes I don't want to think about it. But I do find something special and really exciting when I give it that type of identification on the bucket list. So I'm going to stop talking, play one more song very briefly because I'm almost over time because I talk too much, but here we are. Okay, yes, I know we're over time, but I appreciate all of you sticking around, even though this was the added one, and we joke that even then it goes long, but here we are. So, as always, can you believe we have reached the end? But we always love to continue the conversation in this Look on Sonder app. So we love getting inspiration from all of your pages. But as I had mentioned, if we bring up a previous or an older example that maybe doesn't suit you, or again, you have ownership over, just send us a message on the side and be like, hey, I'm not comfortable with this being shared anymore. Because I think as life transitions, milestones, there's some that I put out there that I was like, ooh, if I had to revisit that. Because again, we don't want it to be triggering, but we are glad that we're having the inspiring conversation when it comes around repurposing, leaning into our new month. Maya is putting in the chat the previous recordings on YouTube. And if you want to take Sonder Coach, aka Jenny, a quick spin, we've got a really fun demo for that. And like I said, we are always updating new and fun things. A lot of our users are quite content with it, and it is just another great perspective. Um, this is a copy of my playlist. I will include the Spotify link there. I did find some really great new instrumental artists, the String Queens, which I hadn't come across. I'm now a big fan of them, and same thing with Lee England Jr. Two faces that I feel like you don't always see on my playlist, and I'm excited to include them. I am going to play one more song, but Maya and I will be here tomorrow for the monthly setup, so I will be in the hot seat again. But you'll also get a slightly new perspective, slightly different things. So as always, we hope to see you at a future event. You guys are going to have an amazing rest of your day. You're going to have an amazing rest of your weekend and an amazing week as we kick off the month of May. And we hope to see you at a future event real soon. Bye.
Running wild, had the whole damn world on top of me. Hard to find a place where they would let me be. But then I found